All right, it is Sunday night, the weekend of September 22nd, and welcome to the Trader Hub Weekly Market Review. Taking a look at the price action for the indexes last week, starting with the NQ as always. What do we see there, Price? What happened?
Well, we basically pumped all week, and we're actually so far holding the higher levels here. And that's going to have us regain this swing here if we can continue to hold. And so it's looking pretty confident that we're going to see at least a retest of 20,600, more likely just going straight through it to all-time high. If we do see a retracement to the downside, we'd really want to be holding this 19,800 range. It could come a little bit further down as a wick, but we certainly wouldn't want to see closes below that 800 level there if we're looking for continuation up. What do you think?
I mean, I'm looking at the same levels as you. I think we're just going to keep continuing to pump overall, probably for quite some time now. I think after this low, and this being sort of a new high, higher than the high that brought us down to that low, we were just looking for a higher low, and gaining a new high is confirmation of this being our first higher high and higher low after the low, so looking like we've regained the uptrend for sure. Getting a little more surgical, I definitely agree with kind of your zone about 19,800 and 19,650-ish. On the way, down to putting in this higher low here, we had about 5 days of price action where our price could not make it above 19,660 there. And that's again why we ended up pushing lower, because we could not go higher, so we had to keep going lower to tap more liquidity pools. On this leg up though, we've definitively gained that, held it, and pumped to a new high on that leg. So that's kind of why those areas that Price is pointing out are so significant, is those were the areas of major resistance for us to kind of continue to push higher. And having held those is a good sign that we're continuing to pump to new highs, and we definitely want to see those levels hold if we do make it back down there. I don't hate a look like that either. I think that we could see some kind of these breakout buyers from Wednesday get slurped a little bit and then continue higher. But overall, I mean, just kind of looking further back at the higher time frame trends, we've made our higher high and higher low, and we now have a new high at this point. So there's no reason to suspect that we're going to get some kind of fake out from the market. We'll have to see. I do think 20,600 on the daily chart is certainly around the area that I want to be looking as well. So we'll have to see what happens this week. I'm expecting continuation, but is there anything different about the ES chart than the NQ?
Well, it definitely made all-time high. Even if you go the back adjusted, it did slightly make it there. That probably, hints toward the NQ making it to all-time high as well. It's not really something you can bank on or really want to risk anything on, but it's something to notice. Similar look. I think there's still an opportunity here at 5,700 for a long if price were to come down there, or even lower. But you'd want to be on the lower time frames and seeing that regain take place before you get in there, and closing up above basically 5,800 would invalidate that idea for right now. What do you think about the ES?
Yeah, I think that's pretty local, but I agree. I mean, I think if nothing else, this is just another confirmation of, let's continue to move this up here. Continuing to look for longs into the future, right? Obviously making new highs is bullish. There's no reason to expect further massive downside from here. I do kind of like the potential idea of it coming down to 5,600, again, to slurp a good amount of these breakouts above the range that it gained. But that would all be areas for me to kind of look to take some, trades with some runners to kind of continue to move to new highs. But I don't even expect that it needs to move back down there. I just don't really want to see it kind of lose this area. I think you said 5,800. Yeah, that's probably a bit more locally, or not 5,800, 57. Something like that, right? The previous all-time high that we gained.
Yeah.
But kind of that zone, super locally, if we lose that, we could, end up coming down to the area that I was talking about. But overall, the higher time frames look bullish. I mean, it's kind of going to be more of a broken record kind of recap here, but everything looks pretty good on equities for higher, and I don't think the NQ is too different than the ES in that regard, although obviously the NQ is a little bit more gaining to do. Anything to add on the ES before we kind of move on to the small caps?
Nope, looking for higher.
Cool. Well, again, like I said, we're going to sound like a broken record. Kind of a nice gain. Definitely gained the level that we were looking to gain to potentially continue moving higher. They kind of slurped the breakouts before doing that, but we are now closing back above the level that sent us down. So definitely seeing what we need to see in order to continue higher. The important thing, though, is if we look down at this weekly chart, right, the level that was the short origin for this entire range for about 2 years, we've gained that, and we've held every attempt to move back below it. So if we can't make new lows, we will make attempts to break new highs. That's exactly what we're doing. All-time high up here at 2460. The level that retested and then sent us down 2 new lows there, and was big resistance even before that, is 2287. And we're kind of seeing that act as a major level that's tough to break through again. But if we can break through this level, I'm expecting all-time high and probably a new high at that point, and we're definitely seeing the kind of price action holding these lows that we're expecting to see if we're about to get a move like that. I think into the coming months, we'll certainly see the RTY continue to move higher, and definitely, like the other charts, having gained enough to consider, longs are definitively back on. We've taken out all the shorts at this point, and we are just, continuing to pump. What do you think? Anything different that you see?
Not particularly, just a specific idea. I really like the with this holding here and potentially closing this next week, we could see a pretty good test right here and then come back down and hold the level for all-time high.
Continuation.
And that could be how that plays out. It's already gotten pretty close before, but that's exactly the kind of look you're looking for before you see all-time high, and I just wanted to highlight that. But basically, I see no reason why it would go down.
No, I mean, it could have some retracements, but the bias is certainly to the upside at this point. But, I mean, there isn't really too much nuance to cover here. The chart looks bullish. We just have to see if we get the confirmation or not this week. But let's move on to gold, which is a lot more, probably the most obviously constructive look on the chart. I mean, if I zoom out, gold has been pumping in the last couple of years. We had our consolidation last year, and this year it's more continuation. Right? The weekly looks really good. We've actually held this fib, the 2.618 fib, at 25.21 that we've been kind of talking about for a couple of weeks now, and actually having held those, essentially what were the previous highs. So we didn't make new lows, so now we're moving to new highs, and we are now at all-time high again. Currently, as the time of this recording, 26.54, and continuing to pump. So, kind of blue skies up here for gold. Makes sense with the dollar falling. We'll talk about that in a bit later, but I would expect gold to continue pumping. Our next fib is quite a bit higher, and I'm not saying it has to reach all the way up there, but over $3,000 an ounce on gold is the next fib. So we've got a long ways that we can continue to go on gold, and we're definitely doing everything that we need to continue pumping on gold here. Definitely looking for longs and expecting continuation until we see otherwise. What do you think?
I think it's pretty crazy locally there. That's exactly what you see before it, does some wild, straight up kind of nonsense. So it could get a little spicy here on gold, pretty quick. Is what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I mean, not too much to cover other than that. Up until we see otherwise. What are your thoughts on the Dow?
Well, and you see how close that is. It's so last week it consolidated in the upper range and continued pumping. And that's not, necessarily a true gap, if you will. But it does look like, maybe not right now, but it does look pretty convincing that they'll come down here to this gap because of just the way it's formed there. Just to kind of slurp everybody that's longed after the gap took place. That would give it the fuel it needs to continue up. But yeah, I wanted to look. Yeah, and that would be a very normal retracement even here on the weekly. Nothing about that would be alarming to long-term bulls, if you will. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's done a really good job of holding 40,000. Even when it lost it here, after gaining up here, it ended up regaining and holding. I mean, I'm just, if we look at that weekly chart again, I mean, looks, you could draw a line right there. I mean, it's holding everything and continuing to pump. I don't see any reason that has to come down. Of course it can, but I think it's just like every other chart right now. You could, come down and test the high for a continuation hold and continue higher, but otherwise I think it could just go straight up in the next couple of weeks. Not a lot of nuance to say there when we're at all-time high and kind of just waiting to see price discovery.
Right.
Well, let's move on to oil then, which is probably the more interesting chart than anything this week. So we'd kind of been predicting for a while after seeing new lows formed, like, okay, well, it'll probably end up taking out some of these lows. Like at this point, we're continuing to make, either new lows or lower highs. So that's not the greatest look for our potentially bullish case. What we would want to see, instead of just taking these longs on the way down, which we don't want to do, we'd love to see a new low put in and a regain of the range somewhere in the order of losing 70 and kind of regaining it. And that's kind of exactly what we got last week, as we did finally get closes back above 70 last week. That doesn't completely validate longs again. We're not quite back in the range that we lost, but it's just the start of kind of potentially regaining here. And starting to see if we can close back in the range to look for some scalp longs that may become part of a greater move. Just a quick little caveat on that, obviously we do think potentially, longs on oil offer a pretty great risk to reward. That's why I've been talking about that for a while, and things for a while looked like pretty good for that. But I think until we sort of regain up here on the weekly chart, maybe like 75-ish, 77, somewhere in this zone where the failure that sent us down to this low, until we regain there, we can't be certain of the higher time frame trend. And if we do lose those again and make new lows, we're talking about potentially going all the way down to the 50s or 40s. So, this is kind of a make or break area for oil, in my opinion. If we don't continue to hold these lows, it's going to get real ugly for oil. But we haven't seen anything quite disastrous yet. This regain looks nice. I will personally be looking, if we can regain 72, 80 here, I would love to look for a retracement long at that point. I mean, you could argue that you could have done it here at 70, 40 like we have marked out, but I want to see a little bit more of a close back up here. What are your thoughts on oil?
Yeah, I think it's already regained, and all it really needs to do is get 74, and it's ready to make it back up here to 78. Not immediately, of course, just this is step one. And if they can close up here in the 74 range and hold it, that, that's the next thing they need to get back to 78 and then, continue on.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think just looking at our chart, somewhere in this, this green box is here for a reason. I think if we don't gain this, we'll probably fail.
Right.
And continue down. So, there's good risk to reward on the longs here with the right levels, but you got to be ready to be wrong, because if this confirms down, it's going to probably continue to lose quite a bit.
Absolutely.
All right, well, another wait and see chart, but the dollar is a little different. Obviously with the Fed meeting, it kind of tanked the dollar while it was in the process of regaining. Now, technically we made a new low and are trying to kind of close back in the range up here. We haven't really definitively lost the range yet, but we are continuing to sort of see lower highs put in, which isn't great. I still think that we want to see 101.4 regained before we really claim victory over this range and kind of see this move that you drew in the last time we did our review. We really want to see this zone kind of gained to really call it for looking for potentially regaining on the dollar here. If we can't do that, it's looking pretty bad. I mean, this is a test of the lowest level that we were saying. If we don't hold 100.2, we could probably lose a couple, a point or 2 points off of that, if not more. I mean, we're essentially testing the level that we gained to send us up here and kind of hold this whole range. So if we lose this, it's a big level. I think we'll probably lose another 2.5 points if we lose 100.2, but if that happens, I'm expecting quite a bit lower on the dollar. I think if I had to put bets on right now, I would say the dollar losing levels is probably more likely than it gaining, but I don't want to say that that's impossible. The big level on the dollar is all the way up here at 104.2. That's the level that started, really kind of confirming more downside, and I think we need to regain this level to start to even talk about potentially moving back up to the higher ends of where the dollar's been. That's kind of my thoughts on it. What are yours?
Well, so I really like what's happening here locally. I agree with the doom and gloom of what happens if we don't regain 101.4 here. But I do really like the fact that it put in that new low, and then it immediately came up and retested that level. And since then, it hasn't closed below the previous low, and that's critical. That's
it's
really
definitely
big.
a good look for sure.
Right,
Locally.
right. So, and I'm talking very precisely in this area here is a very reasonable long opportunity on the Dixie to potentially get 102. But I would agree, it's probably more likely that it'll continue down before that occurs ultimately.
Yeah, another kind of spooky zone. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But I do agree, if you had like a tight stop with longs, probably almost right on the dot, 100.5,
right
around that zone at least, and you could get really surgical on the 1 minute and take a stab at it. But yeah, that's kind of the do or die area for sure. Another beneficiary from the Fed meeting last week is Carry. The regional banks reacted quite well to that news, certainly kind of regaining the levels that we were looking to see regained to continue higher. We've actually regained 58.26, the level that kind of initially locally failed to send us down. We have closed below, but we've gotten closed above, and that's a new high, higher than the previous high. We haven't made a new high locally in terms of breaking the level that hit the high before we went down, but this is a great look to see continuation. We are putting in higher lows, so I'm expecting higher. I think we'll probably end up tagging 60 soon and potentially make further gains after that, but another kind of wait and see moment. Overall, our bullish bias on the regional banks has been rewarded here, so I'm thinking I don't see any reason to kind of question that to continue. I think we'll see more upside on the banks in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, absolutely. It gained 56.58 there, and that's a significant level. If this week it can hold that, it's looking really good to the upside. Not that it's not now, just that's the level it really wants to hold for its upward momentum to maintain right now. And you can see that pretty well on the weekly here, being the previous level of support that was lost and tested there and immediately lost, and then gained higher low, and now we're back up above it. So if we can hold it, we're good to go.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are this week could be a pretty big pumper week. I think we could see 60-50 tested there pretty soon.
I think that's pretty realistic.
Yeah, I do too. So we'll have to see what the week holds for us, but Anyway, thanks for tuning into the Trader Hub Weekly Market Review. If you like this kind of content, sub to the Hub and consider joining our Trader Hub Discord community server. You can find it using our link in the description. See you next week.
Till next time.